Good afternoon, and welcome to the celebration of life for Roland Bruce Nordell. My name is Ron Wolf, and I'm one of Rollie's grandsons, and I'll be your MC this afternoon. We are all so glad to see you here today to celebrate with us. Celebrating might look a little bit different for all of us. For some of us, it might be crying. For some of us, it might be a few laughs. Whatever works for you. Just remember, my grandpa would be so happy to see you here. He'd love to take the time to have a visit with each and every one of you. Asking, how are things in your part of the country these days? Or have you gotten any rain of late? If so, how much? Or how are the crops looking that way? We're going to start today with one of Grandpa's favorite songs, Green, Green Grass of Home. Marg Yulig will be leading, but we encourage everyone to sing along.
I think you've all got the words in front of you, and I think Rollie would love it if we just belted her out. And if you want to stand up and let her belt, I think he'd love that too. For those of you who've been sitting for a while, maybe, I don't know. Anyway. Oh, the old hometown looks the same as I step down from the train, and there to greet me is my mama and my papa. Down the road I look, and there runs Mary, hair of gold and lips like cherries. It's good to touch the green, green grass of home. Oh, they'll all come to meet me, arms reaching, smiling sweetly. Oh, it's good to touch the green, green grass of home. Oh, the old house is still standing, though the paint is cracked and dry. And there's that old oak tree that I used to play on. Down the lane I walk with my sweet Mary, hair of gold and lips like cherries. It's good to touch the green, green grass of home. Oh, we'll all come to see it, arms reaching, smiling sweetly. Oh, it's good to touch the green, green grass of home. Then I awake and look around me at the cold gray walls around me, and I realize that I was only dreaming. There's a guard and a sad old padre, arm in arm we'll walk at daybreak again. I'll touch the green, green grass of home. Oh, yes, they'll all come to see me in the shade of that old oak tree as they lay beneath the green, green grass of home.
Now we will have Betty Wolf, Rollie's daughter, come up and read the eulogy.
Good afternoon, family and friends. Thank you all for coming today as we celebrate the life of my dad, Roland Bruce Nordell. It is my honor to share with you some of my dad's life stories and memories. We have a lot to celebrate today. A man who celebrated his 92nd birthday eating cake and ice cream, was happily married to the same woman for almost 71 years, started and ended his life in the same yard, never heard him say he was going to work, had family and friends who loved him, and was part of a community that he was so proud to call home for all of his life. Dad was born August 6, 1930, the eldest child of Bruce and Mabel Nordell. He grew up on the farm 1 mile west of Turtleford, where he and Mom later retired to in 2006. He grew up playing with the dogs, cats, and horses. Later, he helped with chores, including milking the cows, gathering the eggs, feeding the pigs and cows, filling the wood box, and the barrel with snow to melt for water. Dad attended Turtleford School. As his family lived so close to town, he was the only country kid in his class for the first few years. He would walk, bike, ride his horse to school, or if he was lucky, he would catch a ride with Wintexter going by with the milk wagon. Dad often reminisced about all the good times he had as a child. Many hours were spent with friends at the Turtle River, swimming in the summer and playing hockey in the winter by the light of a lamp hanging on the branch. Playing cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers, riding horseback with friends, hunting crows, magpies, gophers, trapping weasels, skunks, and rabbits. He often talked about the fun he had with his uncles Joe and Jack and his Grandpa Graham. It was easy to go across the field and cross the creek to his Grandpa Graham's farm. He said he had a real farm with a little bit of everything. As a family, on Sundays, Dad would go with his mom and dad on Sunday drives, and his mom and him would sing old songs, and his dad would sometimes whistle. The Sunday drives were a tradition that has never ended. As a family, we would go on a Sunday drive, often stopping to see the cows at some point in the drive. The Sunday drives changed to any day of the week drives, as Mom and Dad enjoyed countless drives around the countryside. Dad loved sports. From a very young age, his favorites were ball, hockey, and curling. He could reminisce about many games, who was playing, the score, who fought, and other highlights. A great day in high school was taking the PA train to Livelong at 6 in the morning to curl in the morning and play hockey in the afternoon. The hockey game was tied 3-3, and they had to quit or else miss the train home at 3 that afternoon. There were many hockey games, the Big Six, Big Four, and the Tired Tigers leagues. There are numerous stories of the Edam Turtleford hockey games. It seemed like there were many fights, some real battles. Yet Dad said those Edam guys were good friends, and he always enjoyed visiting with them and replaying the game. When I asked Dad which hockey he liked best, he said there were so many. But he thought the Big Six was his favorite, when they had 2 Taves, 2 Hansons, 2 Chambers, Gordon Starnes, Alec Marshall, Bob McHugh, Bruce Gordon, Merv Brand, Bob Heaney, Ernie Bame, and Lawrence Sloan on their team. Some great memories were also made when he played old-timers hockey with the Tired Tigers. Mom and Dad enjoyed trips to Japan, Scotland, and Germany with the team. Dad pitched for the Turtleford ball team. He often spoke of the different hard-fought battles against the Mervyn squad, pitching against Oscar Tisch. On one of Mervyn's sports days, Turtleford and Mervyn ended up playing in the final. Hughie von Holloweed scored the only run of the game, wearing his army boots, giving Turtleford the $10 first prize money. Those of the team that were old enough went to the 10-cent store, also known as the bar, to quench their thirst and spend the winnings. It was called the 10-cent store back then because a bottle of beer was 10 cents. Later that day, Dad was backing up from Angle parking on Mervyn Main Street and clipped the back of a parked car. The owner saw it and was not happy. He was giving them the what for on the street. Les Rooks happened along, and his drawl said, "Oh, hell, Rollie. Tell him to bring it over and I'll fix the damn thing tomorrow." That was the end of that, and he was thankful for Les helping him out of that jam. A highlight for him was curling in Saskatoon at the provincial high school finals when he was in grade 12. His rink included Leonard Imbo lead, Lauren Mick second, Bud Phillips third, and Dad skipped. They won the first 3 games and lost in the semifinals. He has often said what a great experience that was, and will point out where they stayed at the King George Hotel. The local pool hall was a favorite for Dad. He often talked about how after the power was turned off and the pool hall closed, friends and him would crawl through the window and get in the pool hall. And on a nice bright moonlit night, they could play for hours. Sleeping in the tent outside with the summer made it easy to sneak out of the yard and into town for pool or whatever other trouble one could find. Other favorite spots for Dad in town were the movie theater, Wagner's Ice Cream Store, and Wajo's Chinese Cafe. Dad established a strong work ethic at a young age. He took care of his horse, fed calves called pale bunters skim milk out of a pail, looked after pigs, chickens, and milked cows. In the winter of 1949, when he was in grade 12, Rio for 3 months, and left him to look after the farm and his Aunt Peg. Before he went to school, he had to do the chores, which involved milking the cows and cleaning the barn. He often didn't get to school until noon, and he said, "I imagine I didn't smell too good sometimes." He was thankful for his good teachers who helped him to catch up on his work. He sure wasn't on the honor roll, but a pass is a pass. At the age of 14, Dad started working in the fields. Every fall, he drove the tractor for his Uncle Rufus, cutting crop with the binder. He drove a team and rack, thrashing, and then later bought a 28-inch case thrashing machine from George Robertson for $600. He did custom thrashing for 4 years, and often talked about sometimes sleeping in the straw stacks and the good meals they got at different homes. On October 31st, 1951, Dad married the love of his life, Marion Brooks. After a honeymoon to Saskatoon with a borrowed car from Grandpa Brooks, they started their life together. They bought their first quarter of land that year for $600. For the first 3 winters, Dad worked at Fletcher's store and Mom at Phillips' store, and they farmed in the summer. After that, it was full-time farming. Side by side, they farmed where my Grandma and Grandpa Brooks had lived, seeding crops for 55 years and raising a herd of cattle that Dad was very proud of. He called them his girls, and every spring there were all the babies. There were many changes over the years. Things got bigger. Some years the crops were good and others not so good. There were long hours, some sore spots where the cows kicked, and sore knees when he fell off the combine. But he wouldn't have changed it. He loved what he did. Not many people are fortunate to enjoy what they do for a living as much as he did. The satisfaction came from seeing the crops grow and the animals, the neighbors and the friendships that were built over the years, with shared interest and working together to help each other out. For Dad, the most difficult part of farming came in 2006, when it came time to make the decision to retire. That was tough. In 1955, Mom and Dad started their family. Gary was born November 18th, and I came along 5 years later. We were lucky kids. We had a great life growing up. We always had a dog, just as Dad had always had a dog. We had horses to ride, and they made sure we had every opportunity to participate in the activities that we wanted to. Dad coached hockey, and they were 4-H leaders. I think Dad enjoyed the club as much as the kids, hauling the calves to North Battleford at the end of the year, getting involved in the pillow fights, and trying to still have fun, but make sure that everyone didn't get kicked out of the hotel. They have supported us through thick and thin. Dad was so excited when he became a grandpa. He loved seeing the kids and having them come to visit. When they were out in the field with him, helping in the yard or with the cattle, he always appreciated the help and just really liked having them around. Mom and Dad made many miles coming to watch ball and hockey games and just to visit. Lots of good memories were made at the cabin at Turtle Lake, and this has continued with great-grandchildren. Mom and Dad have shared a life of work and play together. They have square danced, attended dances in town, danced at Danceland, and went to the Red Barn, skidooed, downhill skied, traveled, and spent many hours visiting or playing canasta, which often lasted until all hours in the morning. Dad was always so proud of the community he lived in. Being part of the community included being involved in many organizations, including the Lions, TADRA, Agricultural Society, Mervyn 4-H Beef Club, Turtleford Credit Union, and Wheat Pool Committee. He volunteered and supported the community in any way that he could. Giving to his community, family, and friends gave him great joy. Being involved meant socializing with people in the community and lifelong friendships. A special memory for him was organizing and participating in the 1976 Turtleford School reunion. I remember very vividly having a conversation with Dad in the basement at the farm when I was just a kid. Dad said, when you die, you don't have anything to worry about because you'll either go to heaven or hell. If you go to heaven, well, there's nothing to worry about. And if you go to hell, you'll be so busy shaking hands with old friends that it won't matter. So, Dad, wherever you are, I hope you're having the contentment and gratefulness that you have had here on earth. I know that you'll be in many hearts today, and we will miss you and love you forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. That was awesome. Next, we're going to have Marg Ulig sing The Dusty Old Farmer.
Dusty old farmer out working your field, hanging down over your old tractor wheel. The sun burning down turns the red paint to orange, rusty old patches of steel. There's no farmer songs on that car radio, just cowboys, truck drivers, and pain. This is my way to say thanks for the meal, and I hope there's no shortage of rain. Straw hat and old dirty hanky, mopping your face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid in the city to you. Straw hat and old dirty hanky, mopping your face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid in the city to you. The combines gang up, taking most of the bread. Things just ain't what they used to be. While your kids are out after the American dream and working in big factories. Well, if I should come by when you're out in the sun, can I wave to you just like a friend? These days when everyone's taking so much, there's somebody giving back in. Straw hats and old dirty hankies, you can sing too, mopping my face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid in the city to you. Straw hat and old dirty hanky, mopping my face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from the kid in the city to you. From the kid in the city to you.
We are going to have a few people share some of their special memories of Grandpa. I will be starting it off today. I was a very lucky grandchild. I got to spend a lot of time with Grandpa, more than most would get to spend with their Grandpa. I was even lucky I got to farm with Grandpa, and some of my favorite memories I will share with you today. In my opinion, Grandpa was a cattle farmer first and a grain farmer second, but that's just my opinion. He loved the cattle. We'd spend hours in the barn. He'd get kicked, pushed around, lose his hat, lose his hearing aids, and pour a little more chop for Ron. Let's get this guy a suck. And yeah, we'd, seeding time, I'd be, let's get going. And no, we wouldn't get out there till noon because everybody got a suck. That was for sure. He showed patience and care. Didn't matter what was going on. He loved those cows. But my favorite cattle story that sticks out to me the most is the last year he farmed at the old place. So it was one day we were shipping some cows out, and not sure how it all worked out, but there's kind of a holding pen, and if you look in the thing there, you can see the corrals, but there's kind of a holding pen, and you run them up the chute, and the truck was there, and we had 90% of them in the holding pen, and so that all went smooth. And that day on the crew, there was me at 22, and Grandpa was 74, 75, and then we had Barry, so he was about my parents' age. So in between 40 and 50, I don't know, he can confirm the age. So you might want to confirm this story with him after too, so not pulling your leg. So anyways, everything went smooth, but there was a half dozen or so steers that need to come in. And they're kind of in the furthest corral. So the plan is we're opening up the corral that goes to the heifers, and then Grandpa was going to stand there, and we just put them into the holding pen, and they'd be gone. So anyways, it had been a little bit of a wet year, and the steer corral, there's down both sides, there was a goat trail, and at the far end was their beds, and then there was a goat trail down the center to the feeders. And then if you stepped off that, you were up to your you-know-what and you-know-what, so you were careful. So anyways, me and Barry, we went down to the far end, and we were bringing them down, and we'd kind of get them to the feeder, and then, kind of the round and round game would go. And anyway, times, and it wasn't working. So when the truck driver was ready to go, and Grandpa kindly told me and Barry to take a seat, and if you knew Grandpa at 74, I could beat him in a foot race at 22 anyways, but he took his time, and he walked down along the fence line, and the steers were standing there, and I'm not sure what he said to him or what he did, but anyways, they lined up, and they just trotted right down the fence line. Me and Barry just stood there. They went right into the holding pen. We walked in the whole penning, right up into the trailer. Driver shut the door, and he was gone by the time Grandpa made it down. So yeah, he was magic with the cows. He could just, Anyways, he didn't say a thing. We just went about. So I would have said something because, it's pretty sweet, pretty good, But anyways, sometimes Grandpa wasn't a man of many words. In fact, reminds me of another story. We were out at English River fencing one day, and English River compared to the farm, if you're going for the day. So you were going fencing, you had everything times 2. You didn't forget it. You weren't coming back for it. So anyways, typical day there on the farm, you get up, you have breakfast. We'd stick around the yard, have lunch, and lunch was the big meal. It was hot, so, you always filled up good, and then on the way out the door, you grab your lunch box, and, around 5 or 6, you'd have lunch, and who knows what time you're making it home at, but we'd have a snack then. So anyways, that day, me and Grandpa were working together, and I don't know who grabbed the lunch box, but somebody grabbed the lunch box and threw it in the truck, and anyways, we're out west, and it's about lunchtime, and Grandpa liked lunch, and I liked lunch. It was usually pretty good, a couple buns and some cookies and a square or two. You didn't come to Grandma's and lose weight, I'll tell you that. So anyways, we both hop in the truck, and Grandpa flips open the lunch bucket, 2 juice boxes. Looks at me, and he goes, well, I guess she's pretty mad at me. Passed me a juice box, and yeah, we had a juice box and carried on. So anyways, and I didn't ask much, and he didn't say much. So that was that. So anyways, Grandpa, he was pretty tough to get off the farm in the summer months, but as he kind of slowed up and retired, or whatever you want to call it, retiring for him, he kind of got into fishing a little more. So fishing at the lake was entertaining with Grandpa for all the wrong reasons. So we, get the boat loaded, minimum 1 dog, maximum 4. So, it's a happening boat already. And then, you get your snacks in there, and, you got somebody coming just to watch, and a driver. And anyways, we'd get out there, and I don't know what it was, but Grandpa's favorite thing to ask, how deep are we right now? And, about 30 seconds later, how deep are we now? And we get to a new spot. About how deep are we now? So he was really curious on how deep the water was. I'm not sure what he was going with. We didn't have much of a science to our fishing, let me tell you that. But anyways, and then if that didn't work, we'd be out there. Somebody would catch a fish in the distance. Well, we should go see what they're using. Let's go ask what type of hook they're using. Or he was talking to Red Pierce, and he did this over there, so maybe we should try that. So we did a lot of trying, but we still hold one unofficial record at Turtle Rake for most time on the water with least fish caught. But anyways, as we grew older and got smarter, we just we saved a lot of hassle, and we just drive up to Keeley for a day, and up north there, the fish are usually hopping in the boat. So by the time we got our bottom bouncers untangled, if we put a full day in, we could probably catch our limit and make our way back to McDonald's for some food. So, but anyways, my final memory for today is a harvest memory, and I still remember this day. We were out on Elliott's one day, and it had to have been a Saturday or Sunday morning because it was just me and Grandpa out there, and Grandpa was getting the combines ready, and I was tagging along. And anyways, things were ready to go, and it wasn't quite lunchtime yet. So he asked me, you got it, or what? You think you're good to go? So, and yeah, I guess after I'd spent a lot of hours in the buddy seat and sleeping on the floor, and then vice versa, he'd sit in the buddy seat beside you, and it was I was king of the field that day. I think he was giving me the green light. So obviously I said, yeah, it was good to go. So only problems with those New Hollands, started in the haybine and the combine, they got this safety feature. If you don't weigh enough, the front end kicks out. So it thinks you're left the seat. So Grandpa had a couple of aftermarket products he put on the seat, and then you just put a pillow over top and you're good to go. So we get going. So anyways, must turned out right. I remember to this day we're still combine away. He went and hopped in the other machine, and then I just remember I was up at the truck dumping, so I must have found some grain, and he pulled up beside me on the other side of the truck, and I remember still looking across at him, and he looked at me, and it was just nothing I said again, just a very special moment. So over the years, I enjoyed many combine rides with Grandpa, and as the years passed, he would come ride along with me wherever I'd hopped on for harvest. So to this day, whenever I get a chance to hop in a combine, I always remember that day and our many combine rides together. Next up, Bonnie Wolf, granddaughter. Come up.
Good day, folks. I'm Bonnie, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my grandpa at the farm. Growing up, we referred to Rollie and Marion as Grandpa and Grandma at the farm. What are you doing this weekend? My friends would ask. Usually the reply was, oh, we're just going to see Grandpa and Grandma at the farm. Many summer holidays, school breaks, long weekends, we would pack up and head northwest to Turtleherd. Once we hit the 13-mile corner, we knew it wasn't too much longer. And when we turned west off Highway 26, we would wait to see that big tree just before Bill Smee's place. Before I had a driver's license, if no one else was heading up, I would get on the Greyhound, or STC, to spend the weekend at the farm. Now, not having a driver's license didn't stop me from getting there. And once I was there, it certainly didn't stop me from driving. If you could reach the pedals, or if Grandpa needed a chore helper, he was happy to teach you how to drive anything. And man, was it fun. While spending most breaks from school up at the farm with Grandpa and Grandma, you could be sure that you'd go to bed tired, you'd go to bed well-fed, and you'd go home with a good story that you may or may not tell Mom and Dad. Isn't that right, Grandma? Grandpa was the hardest working, most patient, kind, loyal, and loving man. These qualities I watched in his everyday life for as long as I can remember. His hard work ethic on the farm was everyday living for him. I don't think he even thought of it as work. He displayed the highest amount of patience, more than anyone I know. Watching him work with his cattle, waiting on the crops to turn, waiting on the weather, waiting on a fish to bite, waiting on our Toronto Maple Leafs to win a Stanley Cup, waiting on, oh, Marion, are you still on that telephone? And I'd bet my last dollar Grandma was talking to Fern. And he always had patience for his kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids. He treated everyone from all walks of life with kindness and respect. His loyalty and love for his family, friends, and community was top priority and heartfelt. Grandpa was always just so happy and content. All of these traits and many more I was lucky enough to learn from him while sharing such wonderful memories and experiences. The simple times we shared together were the best. Cutting hay, country drives, morning chores in the blue 3/4-ton truck, calving season, swathing canola, watching hockey, shooting pool to the old-time dance party, drowning gophers with the dogs, watching the chuck wagons, summers at the family cabin, sharing a dance, a double-boiled cup of tea, or a Crown and Coke. But by far, my favorite time with Grandpa was harvest. There's just nothing better than harvest. Early mornings fueling and greasing the machines, preparing for a full day of taken off crop in the old TR 97 and 98. Dinners on the field on the end gates prepared by Grandma. Working until the late hours of the night with midnight lunches that could feed an army. Grandpa would have us coordinated and running like a well-greased MacDon header. Even when someone picked up a rock, plugged up the rotors, got a flat tire, or had to make a quick trip to the Turtleford Hospital to get stitched up, he just kept us going, and he kept on going. Each year, I hoped for an early harvest so I could get more time together in the field with him before I had to go back to school. Being a granddaughter is quite something. Being an only granddaughter is really quite something. But being my Grandpa at the farm's only granddaughter is one of my life's biggest blessings. So thank you, and I love you.
Next, we'll have Daryl Wolf, grandson of Rollie's.
Good afternoon. I'm Daryl, one of Rollie's grandchildren. Grandpa at the farm as I knew him, the animal-loving, sports fan, farmer, and part-time fisherman. And by part-time fisherman, I mean changing hooks often, always asking how deep the water was, and usually pointing the driver of the boat to the opposite side of the lake. Because obviously, there's no fish over here. He definitely had more patience for his cows than he did the fish. As kids, we got to enjoy lots of times at the farm south of town and at Turtle Lake with Grandpa's company. I remember after he put in a full day's work, I would often bug him for a game of pool in the basement. Sometimes even letting me win, but always letting me retake a shot when I missed an easy one. I'm grateful for those lessons and that time he spent with me in the basement. If it was the weekend and the old-time dance party was on, the whole house would be down there. And believe me, my friends, that was a party. In Grandpa's later years, we got to share some time watching the Leafs, watching the Jays, or watching the Rough Riders on TV. I'll remember Grandpa as a real sports fan. He was an athlete in his younger years, but I never got to see him play. I always did enjoy when he did come to see me play. Grandpa, you were loved, you will be missed, but you will never be forgotten. So I hope the cows are behaving up there, and I hope the fish are biting.
We'll now have Morris and Leanne Tom, friends of the family.
Well, we were honored to be asked by the family to share a few memories of Rollie.
Betty mentioned earlier about her dad's love of animals. That's certainly true, but it was also a two-way street. I noticed the occasional cat who'd started life in the barn somehow seemed to end up living a good portion of it indoors. The cat always sought Rollie out. He seemed to know that he would take him in, and sure enough, he'd always seem to be either in his lap or curled up next to him when we stopped by for a visit. And I'll bet right now that Gingy's claimed his proper place. One day after Rollie and Marion had finished their new home, he was down visiting with Morris. Between the two of them, they somehow decided that just one more thing was needed to make that beautiful yard complete: a view with horses. Well, we had a couple kicking around that we didn't really know what we were going to do with anymore, and Rollie graciously offered to give them a new retirement home. This was all arranged with the thought in mind that Marion, being the lifelong horsewoman that she was, probably really missed having horses around. On our next visit up there, though, Rollie excitedly says to me, "Do you want to go see the horses?" Well, sure. So off we go to the fence. By the way they came barreling over to see him, it was pretty obvious whose pets they were now. And as he fed them their treats and stroked their noses, I wasn't sure who was happier, him or those horses. And there was Shorty. Rollie's dogs had always followed him around and accompanied him everywhere, but Shorty was a little bit smaller, so he could go places that some of the others couldn't. I think he was probably Rollie's first lap dog, and Shorty took full advantage of that.
Several years back, Rollie and Marion came to visit us in Arizona. True to his love of animals, Rollie wanted to see a roadrunner. You have to understand, roadrunners in Arizona are like gophers here. It should have been easy to find one. Well, guess what? No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't seem to find a single one during their visit. Of course, right after they left, who should appear in the yard? You guessed it, a roadrunner. Quite often, I would stop by for a visit in the evening. In the evening, we would have a Crown Royal together, always 2 fingers. Rollie said, "You have to be able to taste the rye." And I have a sneaking suspicion there might have been a wee gap between the fingers. So when we all go home tonight, let's all raise a glass in honor of a great friend and a wonderful neighbor.
Next, we'll have George and Fern Nielsen, friends of the family.
I have to bring a hardcover book. Getting old has its benefits, you know.
Right here.
I lose it. Thank you, Ron. George and I wish to thank Marion and Gary and Betty for the honor of sharing some of our many memories of Rollie with you today. It is somewhat of a daunting task as our friendship goes back almost 58 years. When you lose a good friend, no matter how long they have lived or how rich their life was and full, when they pass, they take a little bit of your heart with them. So if today we shed a tear or if our voice quivers, I ask you to kindly understand that while it might be nervousness, it is also reflective of our love and admiration for this special man. As George and I were recalling and putting a few of our memories together, we quickly realized that when you talk about Rollie, you also talk about Marion, because they were an inseparable couple, a team. So many times in the sharing of these memories, it involves both of them.
My first memory of Rollie probably goes back a little further than Fern's. I think it was probably around 1949 or 50, somewhere in there. And it was grocery shopping day, and we were with my mother, and we were in Fletcher's store. And I saw this young fellow working in the store there, and I thought, gee, I didn't know young people that age could work in a store, because we were more accustomed to people like Harold Phillips or Albert Christensen. And that was my first memory of Rollie, and I got home and asked Mom, I said, who was that young fellow that's working in the store? She said, well, that's Rollie Nordell. That's Mabel and Bruce's son.
My first memory of Rollie was 1965 on our wedding day at the open house in the old Legion Hall. Marion and Rollie and Gary and Betty came to our open house. They shook our hands and wished us well and welcomed me into the neighborhood. And so began a very long, close, and wonderful friendship.
Probably another memory of Rollie was this was after they were well down into their farming career, and we were starting up, and this was in probably about I remember in the spring of 1970, because we were having a very busy time, stressful time at our place. And at about that time, we needed a new bull. And Mary and Rollie were over visiting one night, and so I said, we were talking about getting a bull to a bull sale, and I said, well, just don't seem to be able to get away to buy a bull. So they had mentioned that they were going to Regina to the bull sale. So I said to Rollie, I said, well, when you're down there, buy me a bull. So that was okay. Come back, Mary and come back. Yeah, they had bought me a bull. So the deal was that I'd buy the bull and keep it for a couple of years, and then when I was pretty well finished using him, well, Rollie would buy the bull back from me, and he'd use it for a few years. However, Semitol fever took over the cattle industry, and the poor old black bull, he went by the wayside, I'm afraid.
One of my first impressions of Rollie was that he always met you with a smile and sometimes a laugh. He was a kind man, a gentleman who had an abiding interest in how you were, what was happening in the community, and even the world affairs. And would you believe this keen interest carried on right until 24 hours before he passed? He loved to visit, and he enjoyed the fair each and every year. He loved to see the people that came back. He loved the chuck wagons, and I think he really missed the fair when we didn't have it anymore.
Both Mary and Rollie were a great source of history, and they could tell you who lived in Turtleford and what house they lived in, and any information you wanted to know about the town in that particular era, they pretty well could tell you. They knew who went to war during the Rollie did during the Second World War, who came back, and he felt really bad about the certain people that didn't come back from the war. He also was a great community worker. He helped build the original rink, and when it fell over in July of the year where they were building in 53, I think it was, well, they started over and built it again. He also was involved, Marion and Rollie were both involved in building this arena right here. In fact, I think during Marion, we've got 10 feet extra width on this waiting room that we wouldn't have had if it hadn't been for Marion Nordell. And both of them have spent lots of hours volunteer work with the fair or TADRA, and have given lots of financial donations to help this community be a better place.
But his famous trademark, and you will all know it, was his infectious giggle. Infectious, because if he started giggling with his belly laugh, it was a kind of one-in-the-kind giggle. I remember years ago when the kids were little, both our families went to see a movie in St. Walburg called Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It starred Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke. in the part of the movie where the grandpa was sitting in the outhouse and the hot air balloon flew by and hooked onto the outhouse and took it clear across the sky, Rollie got the giggles. And he couldn't stop. It was hilarious because you could hear him most of the time throughout the theater. At one point, I thought he'd lose his popcorn. I think he must have enjoyed that movie or even more than the kids.
Another thing remarkable about Rollie is the way he treated his employees. Barry Rublitz worked for Rollie for 42 years, some of it full-time and the later years part-time. Also, in the spring of the year, Pete Jimmy would always come to Rollie to help with calving for many, many years. Pete and Rollie had a great relationship together. And one thing they had in common, they were both Maple Leaf fans, so that worked out really well. One thing that they did have that generations of other people will never, well, haven't had, is a reward of seeing Maple Leafs with a Stanley Cup. They also, Pete and Barry, one spring when Marion and Rollie took a trip for 3 weeks to New Zealand, Barry and Pete looked after the whole operation during I think it was during calving season had started, or maybe it was before calving had started. But anyway, they looked after the cattle herd and the farm for 3 weeks while Marion and Rollie were away. Rollie was a true cattleman. He took good care of his cows. His chop pails were always shiny. They never got a chance to get any rust in them. His cows always went to bed on a good, clean straw bed. For Rollie, there was never any better time than calving. And the arrival of the first calf every year was just like an event in Rollie's life. We had lots of canasta games during the wintertime with Marion and Rollie, either at their place or our place. And if a canasta game was in progress during calving season, and sometimes these games would last 6-7 hours almost in the evening. So we'd take a break to snowmobile across to check the cows at whoever places we were, the opposite place where we were at, come back, finish the game.
Rollie loved nothing better than a neighborhood party, be it an anniversary, birthday, or New Year's Eve party, or even a masquerade dance. He was game. Oftentimes, if it happened to be a 25th anniversary for a neighbor, we would stage a wedding skit about the couple. Rollie was often the bride. Not a bashful bride, but a bride nonetheless. We would find him somewhere a white dress, administer some structural upgrades, and here and there, and give him a long curly wig, put on a sheer white curtain for a veil, paint his cheeks rosy red, his eyes blue, his lips bright red, gave him a wildflower bouquet. Oh, Lordy, he looked good. George and Joe Brown, and if we could find a bridesmaid dress big enough, Carl Lundberg were the bridesmaids. They were kind of a scraggly-looking bunch, but the best we could find. A toast to the wedding party and off to perform the skit. The masquerade dance that comes to my mind was held in Mervyn, and Lundbergs and Browns and Marion Rollie and us were Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Carl Lundberg was Snow White, and Einar Jurgensen said he was the biggest Snow White he'd ever seen. I'm not sure if Rollie was happy, sleepy, or dog, but he enjoyed the evening, and I think we even won a prize. They were crazy times, but they were fun times, and we laughed, and we shared many laughs together. But you know what? We made memories that have lasted a lifetime. Marion and Rollie were genuinely good neighbors. For many years, we silaged together, and the kids all have good memories of us working together to put up our feed. One Sunday after harvest in the 70s, our two families piled into Rollie and Marion's car and headed out for a drive. We ended up in the Neilburg-Marsden area where we visited the Swanstroms and toured their Aberdeen Angus herd. Coming home that night, we all sang together so many familiar songs, and I'll never forget it. And about the middle of December, we made some homemade chocolates, Christmas chocolates together that were really delicious. We definitely had many good times together in all the nearly 50, and this is really remarkable, in all of the nearly 58 years we were neighbors and close friends. There was never an angry or rude word spoken. It was a precious friendship, and we cherished it. George and I picked out a very short poem to end our memories, and I hope I can get through it. It's called Until We Meet Again. Until we meet again, we'll think about you always. We'll talk about you still. You have never been forgotten, and you never will. We hold you close within our hearts, and there you will remain to walk and guide us through our lives until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who shared a special memory. That brings the formal part of our program to a close today. On behalf of the family, we'd like to thank the following. All those people who have helped out with Grandpa to keep him in his own home and assist with the cows so he could continue to enjoy having a few around. Everybody for coming today. Those that have stopped by the house for a visit, those that have shared memories, our musicians today, Bill and Bev Meikle and Marg Ulig, Tadra for the lunch we're going to have, and Macaw Funeral Services.